Tim Walz is the nightmare the Democrats just can't wake up from. Let's take a look. Donald Trump must be sitting there thinking he couldn't make up Tim Walz if he tried. Usually a terrible candidate stops doing damage to their party once the election campaign is over and everyone's moved on. But Tim Walz has found a way to keep the party going. Here's a story dominating the news. Now, the New York Times has reported that over the last 5 years, law enforcement officials say, fraud took root in pockets of Minnesota's Somali diaspora as scores of individuals made small fortunes by setting up companies that build state agencies for millions of dollars worth of social services that were never provided. Federal prosecutors say that 59 people have been convicted in those schemes so far, and that more than $1 billion in taxpayers' money has been stolen in the 3 plots they are investigating. $1 billion of taxpayer money, 59 people convicted, and all under Tim Walz's watch. So how did the man, who could have been next in line to the presidency, respond?
Do you take responsibility for failing to stop this fraud in your state?
Well, certainly I take responsibility for putting people in jail. Governors don't get to just talk theoretically. We have to solve problems. And I will note, it's not just Somalis. Minnesota is a generous state. Minnesota is a prosperous state, a well-run state. We're AAA bond rated, but that attracts criminals. Those people are going to jail. We're doing everything we can.
Everything we can, hey? Tim Walz somewhere working round the clock to figure out how to solve the issue. Looking like the big tough guy who can't apologize for putting people in jail. But actually, he hasn't been doing anything. As the official White House Rapid Response X account says, Walz didn't do jack other than let it happen. These are federal cases. Which then begs the obvious question. Had federal prosecutors not gotten involved, how long would this have all gone on for? And how many more taxpayer dollars would have been stolen? Well, we have a clue on this, because another X account, the Minnesota Staff Fraud Reporting Commentary, which claims to represent over 480 Minnesota state stewards, wrote that Tim Walz is 100% responsible for massive fraud in Minnesota. We let Tim Walz know of fraud early on, hoping for a partnership in stopping fraud, but no, we got the opposite response. Tim Walz systematically retaliated against whistleblowers using monitoring, threats, repression, and did his best to discredit fraud reports. Instead of partnership, we got the full weight of retaliation. And why would that be? Let's take a step back here. This is not just a story of $1 billion in hard-working taxpayer dollars winding up in the hands of criminals. This is also a story of vulnerable people who should be getting government aid, not getting it, because those who should be helping are pocketing the money and buying expensive cars. Isn't the Democrats' whole thing being there for the needy? Why wouldn't he have investigated it thoroughly? Now, on one level, it may have just been embarrassing for Tim Walz to have presided over a government that's victim to so much fraud. Maybe he just didn't want to know. But there's something else here, and it's also why Donald Trump is going to benefit so much from this story. The Minnesota Staff Fraud Reporting X account continues that leadership did not want to appear to discriminate against certain communities and were unwilling to take action such as stopping fraud that would have had an adverse impact on their image. There it is, the accusation of racism. And it's not just one X account saying that. Let's jump it back to the New York Times reporting I kicked this video off with. An attempt to bribe a juror included an explicit insinuation about racism, prosecutors said. Several defendants in the trial were found to have arranged to send a bag containing $120,000 to a juror along with a note that read, why is it always people of color and immigrants prosecuted for the fault of other people? Mr. Thompson, a career prosecutor who served as interim US attorney for several months this year and who declined to discuss his own political preferences, said he believed that race sensitivities had played a major role in the rise of fraud. As pandemic assistance were dispersed, the state was also reeling from the killing of George Floyd by a Minneapolis police officer in May 2020. This was a huge part of the problem, Mr. Thompson said during an interview this summer. Allegations of racism can be a reputation or career killer. And this is where Trump comes in. Now, with the announcements on third world migration and the constant threats of deportation, Trump has made the actions of immigrants from undesirable parts of the world a chief focus of politics. And so when the biggest story in America is $1 billion of fraud committed by a group made up overwhelmingly of people with Somali background, Trump's words ring true to voters. And for the Democrat Party, Trump is positioning them as a party so scared of frank conversations about immigration and race that they would rather let corruption run amok than address the issues. And what Tim Walz has done is show the world that Donald Trump is right. In the campaign, Tim Walz's contribution was showing voters the Democrats' version of the Midwestern man's man was someone who made a law requiring schools to put tampons in the boys' locker rooms. And somehow, he's got even more embarrassing. Trump could not have created a better enemy for himself if he tried. That's it for me this week. Remember to like and subscribe to Sky News Australia to make sure you stay up to date with not just my videos, but those of my fantastic colleagues.